If you are a devotee of La Santa Muerte, then I guarantee you by the end of this video, you're going to know more about La Santa Muerte than most of the other devotees out there online. This video is about the evolution of La Santa Muerte, her unofficial history, we can say. There's a bit of debate about some aspects of her origins. We're going to go over all of that in this video. I see a lot of devotees online sharing their interpretation or their thoughts or things that they try to say are complete facts, but they're totally wrong about some of these things. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to know when somebody is misinformed or when they have the incorrect information. So, my name is Leroy. I've been a devotee of La Santa Muerte for many years now, and I love sharing information about her. So if you want to learn more about her, then by all means, subscribe. And if your goal is to become closer to La Santa Muerte, then this channel is a really good place to start. Let's begin with the first portion of this video. Santa Muerte before. Nobody ever talks about this. I've never heard anyone talk about it. Even devotees who haven't done their research can all agree that Santa Muerte comes from the Aztec pantheon, the Aztec underworld. She has ties to the Aztec Empire, and there is some debate regarding this, and I'll get to it later in the video. But what people don't acknowledge or mention is that the Aztec Empire wasn't always around. It has a very definitive start, more or less, and even before the Aztec Empire, which is now located in central Mexico City, before that was formed, the indigenous people migrated from Aztlan, not only Aztecs but other indigenous groups as well. And even Aztlan, the origin place of the Aztec people, even that has a kind of a rough definitive start. But Santa Muerte did not come into existence during the Aztec Empire. Even though she is closely related, she has origins that stretch before that. And so this is the before period, the period I've never heard any devotees of any kind discuss online before. It's important to remember that La Santa Muerte is a force of nature. She is death personified. She is not the only death deity in the world. There are many, but she is one of them. And there's research to be done regarding her origins pre-Aztec, her pre-Mexica origins. And so I'm going to take it upon myself to do the research necessary in order to share it with all of you. And when I say do the research, I mean there isn't a lot of information out there in books or online, so I'm going to have to do some channeling at my altar with Santa Muerte and see what information comes forward. I'm really good for sharing information like that with all of you. And so we don't really know that much about her pre-Aztec form, but when we do know more about it, I'm going to tell you about it. That being said, I only mention this because I want to get you guys thinking about it. And just consider that she is an ever-evolving entity, and she evolves with the times. And whatever she was before, it shifted when the Aztec Empire came into being, and then it shifted again throughout different time periods. And that'll kind of segue me into the next phase. The Mexica people, also called the Tenoch people, they migrated to Tenochtitlan. They created the city there. They migrated from Aztlan, the homeland of the Aztec people. There were other groups that also migrated away from Aztlan, and the Aztec gods that were worshipped by the Mexica people in what is now the area of Mexico City were the same gods that were worshipped in Aztlan. So they carried their gods with them. So we're just going to assume that Santa Muerte, who has close connections with the Aztec underworld, was already being venerated in Aztlan. Santísima Muerte definitely has ties to the Aztec underworld, and there's been a lot of debate about who she is exactly within that domain. The Aztec underworld is ruled over, they have many underworld deities, but the two main ones are Mictlantecutli and Mictecacihuatl or Mictlancihuatl, and people say that Santa Muerte is the female ruler of the Aztec underworld, and others say that she is not the female ruler of the Aztec underworld, but she does have some kind of a presence in Mictlan. And so this is one of the things you're going to see as a devotee if you start to delve into the whole indigenous aspect of all of this, is that There's debate that people will say that she is the female ruler of the underworld, the Aztec underworld, and other people will say she is not the female ruler of the Aztec underworld. But regardless of which side of the fence you're on, we can all agree she has a definite connection to the Aztec underworld. Now, this is not an invitation for you to delve into the Aztec pantheon and their rulers. I guess we could say that basically they're gods and goddesses of that pantheon. I mean, they have their own terminology, but I'm just going to call them gods and goddesses for the sake of this video. But yes, just as a side note, this is not an invitation to try to work through or work with the Aztec gods and goddesses in order to get closer to Santa Muerte. And this isn't even about it being gate-capped or only certain ethnic groups can work with these gods and goddesses. This isn't even about that. This is just saying they are not what you expect them to be. They are not like the Roman gods or the Norse gods. These beings are much more primal and chaotic. And when I say chaotic, I just mean more like primordial. Like, there's something about them that's so unlike regular deities. And I think that they are so raw and powerful, and I don't think most people are even ready to deal with entities like that. But we do all agree that Santa Muerte has connections to this Aztec underworld. And so she had some presence in the empire. We don't know if she was a female ruler or not, but during this time period of the Aztlan and the Aztec and the Mexica people, they were venerating her, they were worshiping her. She had a presence, she was involved heavily with the natives, the indigenous people. And so she has an extremely strong connection to that time period, those beings, those people that worked with her and venerated her and worshipped her and worked with death and who venerated death in their own way. Images of her during that time would look more kind of like those strange statues you would see in museums that come from the Aztec times, the ones that are barely look human or they look very animalistic. She would be worshipped in that form, so we could assume her form resembled something more like that. Also, because it was a different time period and the Aztecs were involved heavily with human sacrifice, I'm not going to get into details here, her veneration looked very different. And it was not a time of political correctness as it exists today. It was all about energy and transference and veneration, so it'd be nearly impossible to replicate that today. When the Mexica people were colonized by the Spanish, a lot of their ways were destroyed and they had their religion, their spiritual practices stripped away from them, and they had Catholicism forced down onto them, and so this led to syncretization. They continued to worship death, but they changed her form. They made her look more Catholic in order to worship in secret or to kind of combine her with their newfound religion in order to carry on their heritage, we could say. And so we get forms, the first forms of Santa Muerte as we know her today. A woman praying, a woman covered in a shawl. We think of like the Virgin Mary, her typical iconography, but kind of with Santa Muerte in her place. Not as a replacement to the Virgin Mary, but just taking on more standard Catholic religious imagery, because she has now been syncretized, she has now been combined with the Catholic religion. And so that was how she was worshipped early on. Think of death, but in a more Catholic image. And so Santa Muerte very early on became entwined with Catholicism through being colonized through Mexico, what is now known as Mexico, being colonized by the Spanish. And even today, many Catholic people still work with and venerate La Santa Muerte through a Catholic lens. They don't associate her with anything other than Catholicism. So in their minds, she is still very much Catholic. She has always been Catholic. She always will be a Catholic, being a Catholic saint, even if officially the Catholic Church doesn't really acknowledge or even approve of her. We can assume that from the time of post-colonization up until nearly presently, Santa Muerte was her only real imagery was through a Catholic lens. So the typical Santa Muerte praying, Santa Muerte carrying Jesus, Santa Muerte with crosses, Santa Muerte with a rosary, things like that. This is all a product of syncretization. And that syncretization is still a huge part of the entire worship and veneration of Santa Muerte even today. Presently, the images of Santa Muerte have changed. The statues look a little bit different. Some of them still resemble Catholic imagery, but other ones are like straying farther away from Catholicism. Some of them, she looks maybe more menacing. Some of them, she looks like a robed figure, but the robe's starting to look less religious and more just like typical Grim Reaper kind of robes. Not to confuse Santa Muerte with the Grim Reaper, of course. But as time passes, we are starting to stray away from Catholic imagery and potentially Catholic veneration. Current statues of the Santa Muerte are no longer as syncretic as they used to be. A lot of them are beautiful, ornate, all kinds of different animals and designs and colors, but not necessarily Catholic, not necessarily syncretic. These statues themselves, the imagery has begun evolving. Anything that exists within humanity evolves over time. Languages evolve over time. Meanings of things evolve over time. And Santa Muerte is no exception. She also has evolved over time. And today, most of the statues you see, I would say the majority of them don't scream Catholic when you see them. She's not usually praying. She's not usually holding a crucifix or a rosary like she used to. And although Catholic prayer and things of that nature are still a huge cornerstone of Santa Muerte's veneration at this time, I imagine things will begin to change over the next coming years. When I think of the future of Santa Muerte's devotion, the future of her worship, the future of her imagery, it's hard to imagine what it will become. There are so many more people sticking their hands into the pot. There's so many more people who Santa Muerte is touching the lives of across all the world, across all the cultures, across all the ethnic groups and all the different diverse humans that exist on the earth. And a lot of these people, they're not Catholic. Santa Muerte can be worked with by people who are not necessarily religious. And because of that, it's given room for her to be interpreted through the eyes of devotees who have no religious associations. What does that mean? It means she's going to start appearing more and more often, and it's going to become more normalized for her to have images that are so far away from her Catholic syncretization and her, even further still, from her Aztec origins. It's very possible and very likely that 100 years from now, 200 years from now, Santa Muerte may not even be a skeleton. She might not even have a scythe anymore. And that sounds so strange to say, but think about Santa Muerte right now and think about her in the Aztec times. She did not have a scythe then, and she was not wearing a robe. She changes over time because she evolves alongside humanity, at least the way they view her. And it all seems to be part of the grand scheme of things. It seems to be some kind of a divine plan, because even though her images, they become altered over time. And maybe some of the meanings change, and maybe some symbols are forgotten, and maybe some newer symbols are incorporated. At the core, she is still the same being, and she is still Santa Muerte, and she's still there for her devotees, whatever they may look like in the coming years. With Santa Muerte becoming more global, and with the rise of the internet, more and more people are discovering her, more and more people are interpreting her, and more people are putting their own spin on it, on her devotion, for better or for worse. A lot of devotees today are very much traditional, as in they mostly use Catholic imagery and Catholic prayer. And because of the online spaces being occupied by people who also don't practice in a Catholic way, it's led to a lot of infighting between devotees. And so I think change is organic. I'm not saying we should throw away traditions. I think traditions are a very, very important part of being a devotee. It's important to remember the origins, but you also have to remember that it is natural for things to die and be reborn, for certain images of Santa Muerte to die and for her image to be reborn in a new way. She's gone through many changes. She's gone through many deaths and rebirths in the minds and in the consciousness of the public. And a lot of current devotees fight very, very strongly against changes. And right now the changes are small. And I'm not referring to newer devotees who discard certain ways of working with the Santa Muerte out of inconvenience and just want to shape her into whatever they want her to be. I'm not necessarily referring to that, but I am talking about people who come from the left-hand path or from Buddhist or other kinds of spiritual backgrounds who are working with Santa Muerte and who are creating their own practices and their own types of devotion. And it's almost like Further on down the line, there could be multiple different religions that are based off of Santa Muerte worship, and they may all be different from each other. The same way there's different kinds of Christianity, like there's Baptist, Episcopal, non-denominational. I feel we're going to have that with Santa Muerte. There's going to end up being many, many different groups, different schools of worship, different ways to work with Santa Muerte. And I guess I imagine there'd probably be very strong feelings because people are very passionate about Santa Muerte. People who are devoted to her, they love her so much, they feel very passionate about it. And so in the future, that's what I imagine, just based on the way life goes and the way things naturally evolve. I don't want to think of this video as a history lesson. Think of it more as me going over the evolution of the Santa Muerte's image and what that means going forward, what that means as a human, what that means as a devotee. If you learned something new watching this video, then definitely hit the like button. I would really, really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe and join my community of devotees that I'm building from all over the world. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for existing. And I cannot wait to see you in the next one. Take care.